Hi, everyone. I'm Vladimir Jutit. We are watching all the news happening in the United States and around the world. Check out these monitors behind me here. You can see these are feeds coming into the CBS News Broadcast Center here in New York City from all of our stations and affiliates around the country. If it's happening out there, we're going to bring it to you live right here. Let us begin. 2 people found dead inside the landing gear of a JetBlue plane after it arrived in South Florida. What we know about how they got there and how the airline is responding. And remembering Jimmy Carter, the former president's remains traveled to the nation's capital today for a series of ceremonies honoring his life and legacy. Plus, major changes coming to Facebook and Instagram as Meta plans on getting rid of its fact checkers. Why now? And what the platform says will go in its place. This is CBS News 24/7. But we begin this morning with that disturbing discovery at the Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport in Florida. JetBlue has confirmed that the bodies of 2 people were found inside the landing gear of a plane last night. The airline says they were found during a routine post-flight inspection of a plane that ultimately landed at New York JFK Airport after making stops in Salt Lake City and Kingston, Jamaica. CBS News Miami reporter Morgan Reiner has the latest from Fort Lauderdale.
That's right. JetBlue confirmed for us that during one of their routine post-flight inspections, they did find 2 people in the landing gear compartment of one of their flights. Unfortunately, both of those people were dead. At this hour, we do not know their identities. We don't know how they got through security and into the landing gear to begin with. We do know that the flight came from JFK in New York, which is about a 3-hour flight time. JetBlue added that this is a heartbreaking situation, that they are committed to working closely with law enforcement to figure out exactly what happened here. You know, for hours overnight at Fort Lauderdale International Airport, passengers, people arriving here at the airport did see a medical examiner, a crime scene van, several Broward County Sheriff's Office deputies. You can see behind me now, operations are back to normal here at the airport. It's been very busy all morning long. Of course, we will let you know as soon as we get any more information about this deadly investigation. Back to you.
All right, Morgan, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Let's bring in CBS News senior transportation correspondent Chris Van Cleve to talk more about this. So, Chris, we gave some details at the top there about the flight, but what else do you know?
Well, Vlad, there's a lot of things that we don't know on this situation. That airplane, for example, started its day in Kingston, Jamaica, flew to New York, then Salt Lake City, then back to New York before it ultimately ended up in Miami. And at each of those points, at the very least, the pilots do a walk around the airplane and check things, and they typically will look inside the wheel wells. But we don't know when those people got on board the airplane inside that wheel well. So often in these cases, it occurs on an international flight bound for the U.S., so it's possible that these stowaways got on board in Jamaica, but we just don't know. And that raises some questions that need to be answered. When did somebody have access to the airplane, and who were they? Were they people who were perhaps employed at the airport who would have had some access to the aircraft, or did they breach security? If they breach security, they need to know where that happened so it doesn't happen again for very obvious reasons. These stowaway circumstances are rare. They also tend to be deadly. The wheel well is not pressurized. It is not climate controlled. So you're exposed to very little oxygen once the plane gets to 38,000 feet. You're also exposed to sub-zero temperatures for prolonged periods of time. That plane flew at 38,000 feet for well over an hour. That temperature up there is probably not survivable for anyone without special equipment, not to mention the lack of oxygen. So this is not the way to try to stow away on an airplane. Of course, it's illegal to stow away on a plane, but this is a ticket to death.
That's an excellent point. Chris, let me pivot here and ask you about the weather. As you know, it's been a bitterly cold week for travel with the winter storm blanketing parts of the Midwest all the way up to the East Coast. Are airlines bouncing back from some of the cancellations and delays that travelers have experienced?
Yeah, you know, when the day started this morning, there were fewer than 500 cancellations. 24 hours earlier, we were talking about 3 times that number. So today is a better day. We're going to see a lot of cancellations, particularly in the morning, that first bank of flights for the airports that really got hit by snow because those airplanes just weren't there. The first flights out of Chicago O'Hare to many of those airports got out more or less as scheduled, so that's a good sign. You will see residual delays. For example, the Cincinnati airport was seeing lengthy delays this morning. Denver is seeing snow. You have windy conditions in the New York City area. That's never good news for Newark and LaGuardia. So there are going to be some challenges today. It's going to be a better day likely than it was yesterday. You still may see more delays than you would normally see. What we're going to watch is how these cancellation numbers move throughout the day. But right now, better than yesterday, still not as good as what we're used to. And that may not come until tomorrow. But as soon as things are sort of reset and back to normal, we're going to start talking about weather disruptions probably in the south, like Dallas in particular, as another storm moves towards the East Coast by the weekend. So it's just going to be a challenging week for flyers and certainly a challenging week for drivers in the areas that are getting the severe weather, too.
All right, Chris Van Cleave for us this morning. Chris, thank you very much. For more on the weather, let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with the first look at the national forecast. Hey, Grant.
Hey, Vlad. Yeah, look, Chris really talked about all the major points that we're watching across the nation today. Really cold conditions really inundating much of the eastern half of the United States. Breezy conditions in the wake of that storm system that moved through the mid-Atlantic and northeast yesterday. Still some lake effect snow. You've got snow moving through the high plains out of the Rockies. And you talked about windy conditions, not just windy in the northeast, but also extremely dangerous conditions from a fire perspective because of these Santa Ana winds rolling into Southern California. In some cases, we could see some wind gusts today around 70 to 80 miles per hour, maybe even in some instances gusting up to 100 miles per hour. And that gusty conditions combined with the dry air and the dry fuels on the ground is only going to make the fire weather more critical, if not extremely dangerous, into tomorrow. So really watching Southern California. But back to the cold air. Many people across the eastern half of the United States waking up to this Arctic air really coming in, and it's blowing in, dropping wind chills into the single, if not to the negative digits. And then Chris alluded to this as well. High pressure's in control across the central United States right now, but as we go into the second half of the week, that high pressure system will be moving out. A low pressure system begins to develop there over northern Mexico. It taps into the moisture of the Gulf of Mexico, that Arctic air in place. There's your winter storm moving across the midsection of the United States. That's going to be a big player in our weekend as we go through not just Thursday, Friday, but like I said, into the weekend as well, Vlad. A lot to track as we head through the first couple of weeks of January.
Oh, boy. All right, Grant, thank you very much. We'll check in with you a little bit later. The remains of former President Jimmy Carter will head to Washington in the next hour, where the 39th president will lie in state at the Capitol for 2 days. A state funeral will be held at the National Cathedral on Thursday. He will then be brought back to Georgia, where he will be laid to rest. I want to bring in CBS News correspondent Skylar Henry, who's following the very latest for us and has been tracking this from the very beginning. Skylar, what is the process for bringing the president's body to Washington today?
Well, Vlad, good morning to you. In a couple of hours, there will be a brief ceremony here at the Carter Center where staff and volunteers will pay their final respects to the 39th president before they are then transported to Dobbins Air Force Base. And then from there, the 39th president will be taken to Andrews Air Force Base, where he will then be greeted for another brief ceremony. And then the late president, along with his family, will have a series of ceremonies before they end up at the U.S. Capitol. One of the main stops will be in front of the U.S. Navy Memorial, obviously signifying and recognizing Jimmy Carter's time in the Navy. He will then be brought to the U.S. Capitol, where he will lie in state. There will be a service there as well, where we anticipate eulogies from Senate Majority Leader John Thune, as well as Speaker Mike Johnson, along with Vice President Kamala Harris. And after that service, there will be an opportunity for the public to pay their final respects at the U.S. Capitol between 6 p.m. and midnight tonight. They say that lines will be long, and because of the weather in that area, they anticipate some delays. And so they are asking people, if they do plan on going out to pay their respects to the late president, to dress warmly and to be prepared for potentially long wait times.
And Skylar, you were there in Atlanta. You had been there in Atlanta for the past few days as the public got a chance to pay their respects there. What were folks telling you?
Well, a range of things, Vlad. Many people far and wide who've come out here to pay their respects simply said that they wanted to honor the man that meant so much to the state of Georgia, meant so much to the world, and really recognizing what he was able to do as it relates to the second act, that post-presidency, if you will, and all of the things that he was able to accomplish here at the Carter Center, whether that in the names of humanitarian rights or democracy or health care initiatives, and really coming out to say, this is a guy who not only walked the walk, but talked the talk in so many ways. They say that he was perhaps one of the last statesmen with humility. They also appreciated what he was able to do, not only around the world, but down in Plains, right? So much so that the people who grew to know him called him Mr. Jimmy, because they say that he didn't walk around and move around as if he was the president and leader of the free world. He was just the neighbor next door. And so they say that, yes, they will miss him. Yes, they appreciate all that he's done, but they really say, job well done, Mr. President.
Indeed. Skylar Henry for us this morning from Atlanta, Georgia. Skylar, thank you very much, my friend. Appreciate it. All right, we are expecting to hear from President-elect Donald Trump in the next hour. This as his attorneys are trying to block the release of Special Counsel Jack Smith's upcoming report on 2 of his dismissed criminal cases. Joining me now is CBS News political reporter Olivia Rinaldi to talk more about it. So, Olivia, what else did Trump's attorneys say in this letter?
Yeah, good morning to you, Vlad. It's good to be with you. This letter that was released last night from Trump's attorneys to Attorney General Merrick Garland pleads with him to not release this final report from Jack Smith. Now, this report is about the 2 investigations that Jack Smith had into President-elect Donald Trump when he was out of his presidency related to the January 6th efforts to overturn the election, but also the Florida classified documents case. Now, both of those cases had been dismissed, but Smith was still expected to release this report before Trump was set to retake office. And we know that Trump's attorneys had been reviewing the final report over the last several days. And after that, they then released this letter pleading with Garland not to ultimately release this report. They argue 2 things in that letter. They say, 1, that Jack Smith should be fired from the special counsel position, arguing that he should be removed for even suggesting this course of action because of his, quote, political motivations. But then they also say that this report should not be released because they have an incoming attorney general who should have to review this. That would be Pam Bondi if she were to be confirmed by the Senate. So a lot of arguments that they are making there to prevent this potentially damaging report from being released.
So Jack Smith, as you know, Olivia, actually responded to the filing this morning. What do you have to say?
Yeah, in a court filing this morning, he said that the office was preparing to release the classified report that could have, quote, prosecutorial decisions. However, they say that this report is ultimately up to Attorney General Merrick Garland to decide whether or not he will release it. And they say that that volume won't be released, that decision won't happen, rather, until Friday, January 10th at 10 a.m. So a lot for them to consider over the next couple of days, but ultimately it is up to Biden's Department of Justice head, Attorney General Merrick Garland, to make that decision on whether or not this report will be released at all. And I should note that Friday, January 10th, that's just 10 days until Trump is set to take office, really unearthing a lot of perhaps new information that they could have found that had not been released as a result of those several investigations.
The president-elect, Olivia, as you know, also faces a sentencing this Friday in that hush money case, despite his attempts to stop it. What are we hearing on that front?
Yeah, Friday is going to be a very busy morning for Trump's several court cases that have unfolded. We know that Judge Merchan in the New York hush money trial case denied Trump's request to delay that sentencing. In that case, we know he was found guilty on 34 counts of felonies back in May. So this sentencing has been delayed twice now. Judge Merchan put it on the books for this Friday at 9:30 in the morning. Trump can appear physically in person or virtually. And he's been working to delay that decision. Judge Merchan has said he's still holding it on the calendars, but we are expecting Trump's lawyers at any point to appeal to the appellate court in New York, saying that they are trying to appeal the case and the conviction entirely. And because of that, the sentencing should not take place. So, Vlad, I expect it'll be very busy come Friday morning between the hours of 9 and 11 a.m. a.m. with a lot of news coming out of Trump's court cases.
Yeah, make sure you book some time for us, Olivia, because we're certainly going to want to talk with you. Thank you very much. All right, the U.S. is transferring 11 Guantanamo Bay prisoners out of Cuba to Oman. We're live at the infamous detention facility next. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Over the last 2 years, CBS News has investigated the cases of thousands of gay and lesbian veterans kicked out of the military and denied honorable discharges, costing them benefits like loans, health care, and tuition assistance. Now, the Pentagon has reached a historic legal settlement with more than 35,000 LGBTQ plus veterans. I want to bring in CBS News chief investigative correspondent Jim Axelrod, who's joining me now, who's reported on this for quite some time. Jim, what are you learning, first of all, about the details of this settlement and what happens next for these veterans?
I think the best way to understand this settlement is to think about it as a shift in terms of the burden of taking care of this injustice. Because as you just described, there's all sorts of things not available to veterans who were discharged in an other than honorable fashion. And that's really what we're talking about here. It used to be people who wanted to appeal that had to get their records and fill out an application, in some cases hire a lawyer. What this does is take the burden from the victim of the injustice and puts it on the Pentagon to get it right. That's the biggest thing to understand about this.
Just describe for our viewers the journey that these veterans have been on all this time and what their lives have been like waiting for this moment.
Well, our investigation essentially identified about 35,000 gay and lesbian veterans who had been drummed out of the service for their sexuality. 2012, the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy changes, but that gives us a decade or more from then to now, where if veterans wanted to try to upgrade their discharge from other than honorable to honorable so they could access these benefits we're talking about, it was all on them. So yes, the letter of the law allowed for a process of appeal, but it was so burdensome and it was so difficult that we heard from vet after vet after vet that essentially it was impossible. As the investigation wore on and we got to shine a little bit of a light on this, the Pentagon, while they wouldn't really talk about it, obviously there were things going on where they eventually said, okay, we'll do better. But then a lawsuit was filed because they actually still hadn't taken the onus of fixing the problem. They just sort of put it still on the veteran. So that's what all of this settlement does, is say, you know what? It's on us. The Pentagon will now have to expedite the process for these discharge upgrades.
And it's not just receiving that honorable discharge, right? As we said, it's access to the benefits that they're due and a host of other.
There are, and it's, as you pointed out, there's some tuition assistance, some health, mortgage, all kinds of stuff. But as we talk to these veterans, you really need to understand that there was something so personal that as one veteran told me, Cheryl Farrell, she kept saying, you know what? This is about, all I want to do is serve the country. And I'm being told I can't simply because of who I love. And when she put it that way, it was very powerful and poignant. She certainly wanted access to the benefits, but more than anything, she wanted an honorable discharge on her DD-214, the paper that tells you why you're leaving and in what form you are leaving the military. She wanted an honorable discharge that she could put in a frame and hang on her wall because it was the most important thing about her professional life. And she couldn't have one until now.
Wow, incredible reporting as always, Jim. Thank you very much for sharing it with us.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Well, the Pentagon says that the military has just transported 11 Yemeni Guantanamo Bay detainees back to the Middle East. The mission is part of President Biden's longtime effort to shut the prison down, dating back to the Obama administration. CBS News Pentagon reporter Ellie Watson has the latest details and is joining us now from Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. Ellie, explain what played into the decision to release these detainees and what are the terms of the releases?
Right, so 11 detainees originally from Yemen
Jim.
were transferred to the government of Oman late Sunday into Monday. These are 11 men who have never been charged with crimes, have been held for more than about 2 decades, and in many cases, a review process found that many of them were transferred or were eligible for transfer, did not pose a threat to national security years ago. And now the government of Oman has decided to accept them, will help resettle them into a new life. In the past, the U.S. has asked the government of Oman not to let these detainees travel out of the country for around 2 years after they arrive. This is just the latest transfer the Biden administration has made in the past month, and is part of, as you said, the Biden administration's effort to dwindle down the population here so it can eventually close the facility. With these 11 men gone, there are now just 15 men at the prison facility, which is the smallest number in the population since the prison began in 2002, and that at its height had around 800 prisoners.
So one of the detainees that's still at Gitmo is Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. Of course, he's accused of being a co-conspirator of the 9/11 attacks. Tell us more about how the guilty plea hearing unfolded this week.
Yeah, so KSM, the alleged mastermind behind 9/11, is scheduled to plead guilty on Friday in court here at Guantanamo. He's expected to plead guilty as part of a plea agreement that would have him plead guilty to his role in 9/11 in exchange for taking the death penalty off the table. He would plead first, and then 2 other co-defendants who have also struck deals would plead potentially the following week. Now, this is the agreement that was struck, if you remember, over the summer, last summer, that shortly afterwards, Defense Secretary Austin tried to revoke. The judge said he could not do that. The Defense Department appealed that decision and was rejected by a military appeals court. We're kind of in limbo here because the Pentagon said as recently as last week that it is exploring its options and whether to appeal to a higher court, the D.C. Circuit Court, but so far has not done so. So as of now, we're going forward on Friday with an expected guilty plea from the alleged mastermind of 9/11 more than 20 years later.
All right, Ellie Watson for us this morning. Thank you, Ellie. Minneapolis police and the Department of Justice have agreed to overhaul and reform the city's police training program in the wake of George Floyd's murder. Details on the new mandates next. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Here's a look at some of the top stories we are following. The Minneapolis City Council approved an agreement with the federal government to overhaul the city's police training program in response to the murder of George Floyd in 2020. The new agreement says police must use the lowest level of force needed to ensure their safety when making an arrest. Officers will be required to intervene when they see another officer break the department's rules, and police can no longer put children under the age of 14 in handcuffs. The agreement comes after a 2-year Justice Department investigation that found officers used excessive force and violated people's civil rights. The U.S. has reported its first human bird flu death in Louisiana. State health officials say the patient was over the age of 65 with underlying medical conditions. The patient was hospitalized last month with severe respiratory symptoms after being exposed to infected wild birds in a backyard poultry flock. The CDC says the risk to the general public remains low. Donald Trump Jr. is expected to visit Greenland today. This comes after his father has suggested that the United States should take control of the territory. Yeah, take control. The president-elect's son reportedly has no official meetings planned and is just going on a private trip, but the president-elect has linked his son's visit to his renewed interest in acquiring Greenland. In a Truth Social post moments ago, he wrote in part, quote, "This deal must happen. Make Greenland great again." By the way, Greenland is part of Denmark, so you'd have to go through Denmark. Anyway, what difference does it matter? It's Donald Trump Jr. He's going to Greenland. All right, let's get into this one. Meta is overhauling its fact-checking programs. The changes will end the current system and adopt a series of community notes, kind of content moderation that is similar to what is used on X. This will apply to posts on Instagram, Threads, and Facebook, and comes along with changes that will scrap an option for users to limit the amount of political content on their feeds. So for more on this, I want to bring in CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
So let's kick off the new year with this discussion about Meta and this community notes thing. First of all, what is your take on this? I mean, it's not lost on a lot of people that Mark Zuckerberg, along with a bunch of other CEOs, are flying down to Mar-a-Lago, kissing the ring, donating money to the inauguration, and to Trump himself, I guess, through the inauguration fund. And now you're seeing a pivot to a sort of a Musk style of managing this company, Meta. What do you think?
So, look, I think this is a little bit of reading the room. I mean, Meta has faced backlash for censoring posts for years. And of course, not just Meta, a number of other social platforms, Twitter, before Elon Musk brought it. And so I think what you're seeing is these tech companies seeing where, the public discourse is going and saying, OK, well, there does seem to be something that people are liking on X, not everyone, of course. And so we're going to move towards that. And really, this change, they're getting rid of third-party fact checkers, just for some context, and they're putting the responsibility more on the users to identify what content needs context. What content is not true, that, oh, well, there's actually a little bit more nuance here. And you see that's something that Elon Musk has instituted on X.
Yeah, so help me understand this, because, and I think a lot of people will have questions about this, because I'm not well versed in it. But from what I understand, up until this moment, Meta has had this third party, as you mentioned, the international fact checkers. And Zuckerberg, in a statement that he posted on Instagram and on Facebook, says that that fact checking became biased in his view. But I'm struggling to understand how people who are paid to be and I don't know the backgrounds or the CVs of the folks that were hired to do this fact checking, how that is somehow worse off than somebody tweeting from your community noting from your bedroom or from your toilet bowl. Like, you're like, oh, this doesn't sound right to me. And then you're going to fix it and put a community note, as opposed to an organization that's there to sort of ensure that there isn't misinformation.
Well, and I think that is the crux of it. That is being tested right now, because we have seen the system in place before. And of course, I mean, we're humans. We have bias. I mean, even you and I, right? I mean, you can't report every single fact in a 90-second report. And so you see this move more towards, well, on X, on Meta, there's such a diverse base of people with different backgrounds, different perspectives, different socioeconomic backgrounds, that might be a better solution than a group of people, or even artificial intelligence that is trained by people with certain biases, whether they be political opinion, et cetera. So I don't think that we know yet what is going to be the better realm, but at least with, I think, Meta and X, they can say, well, actually, this is on you now, not necessarily us.
On the company. And he seems to indicate that this will be better for protecting children. Is that your take as well?
So this is where I think it gets interesting, because they did say they're going to focus all of their efforts really on illegal activities. So scamming, fraud, child protective content, getting rid of pornography, things like that. So I think the idea is we're not going to be focusing on whether this content is true or not. It's really going to be more about, let's get rid of the illegal content.
That's good. That's a good thing. Let me ask you about UFC CEO and Trump supporter Dana White. He set to join the board of Meta. How did that happen?
This is an interesting one. Just for some context, I mean, this happens with public companies every few years.
Everybody gets
you have a board of
right.
directors, and their terms are up, and new ones come in. So it wasn't just Dana White; it was a couple of others as well. I do think this goes back to that diverse perspectives element, that you do see these tech companies thinking about broadening their audience, thinking about this new administration, and saying, well, maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea to have someone with ties and an inside line to this particular new administration that's coming in. I will also say the UFC, really big in sports and streaming. That's something that you're seeing some of these social media companies go
I just
after.
find it remarkable, Kelly, you'll know this better than I, that these CEOs are sort of flying down to Mar-a-Lago. They're bending the knee, kissing the ring. But you know as well as I do, the president, I don't think he sees those folks as being powerful. When you eventually come around to his way of seeing things, he probably thinks you're weak. And these guys must be thinking, oh, I'm currying favor. Meanwhile, the president-elect is probably like, I got your number.
Possibly, but hey, he's also going to be, installing the DOJ, and they're looking at some trials coming up. So that's important.
Exactly right. That's another important detail. Kelly O'Grady, always great to have you, my friend. Thank you very much. Good to see you. All right, let's turn back now to one of our top stories. Former President Jimmy Carter's remains will make its way to Washington later today, where it will lie in state for 2 days in the Capitol Rotunda. Members of Congress and the public will be able to pay their respects. Let's bring in CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killion to walk us through the process of Carter's body arriving at the Capitol. So, Nicole, what more can you tell us that we didn't hear from Skylar?
Well, what we know is that once the president's body arrives here in Washington on Special Air Mission 39, he will then be transferred from Joint Base Andrews here into the nation's capital, where there will be a transfer ceremony and funeral procession starting at the U.S. Navy Memorial. Of course, we know that the president served in the Navy, attended the Naval Academy not far outside of Washington in Annapolis, and so there will be a special ceremony there where his remains will be transferred onto a horse-drawn carriage, and then there will be a procession from the U.S. Navy Memorial, which is just a couple of blocks away from where I'm standing here at the Capitol, down to the Capitol, where there will be an arrival ceremony. What will be interesting to watch about that is that procession will actually mirror Jimmy Carter's inaugural parade route. He was the first president to get out of the car and to walk along the parade route. So we will see a similar walk where his family will accompany him, making their way down here to the Capitol. And then, of course, once they get here, there will be, as I mentioned, an arrival ceremony that will be presided by members of clergy. Members of Congress have been invited to that, members of the Supreme Court, the mayor of Washington, D.C. We expect Senate Majority Leader John Thune, as well as House Speaker Mike Johnson and Vice President Kamala Harris, all to deliver eulogies and lay wreaths. And then following that ceremony, of course, the president will lie in state here at the Capitol for the next 2 days until his state funeral on Thursday.
All right, Nicole Killian for us at the Capitol. Nicole, thank you so much. Appreciate it, my friend. Chinese President Xi Jinping has called for an all-out search and rescue effort after a powerful earthquake hit Tibet this morning, killing at least 126 people. According to Chinese state media, nearly 200 people were injured in the quake and more than 1,000 homes have been damaged. The U.S. Geological Survey says the earthquake measured a magnitude of 7.1 and was at a relatively shallow depth of around 6 miles. Laura Bicker with our partners at the BBC is following the very latest from Beijing.
The quake struck in the foothills of Mount Everest. This is a remote, mountainous community that is scattered over hundreds of miles. Now, you get an idea of the challenge because the Chinese Air Force launched an unmanned drone and flew it over the region. They're trying to direct the thousands of rescue teams who have made their way to the area to the worst affected towns and villages. And when you see the footage, you see these large planes which sit about 14,000 metres high. And overnight, we're told that temperatures are going to dip to minus 18 degrees Celsius. Now, rescue teams we've seen on Chinese state media are combing each of the buildings brick by brick, looking for survivors. Many of those who have managed to be pulled from the wreckage of their homes are still covered in dust. They're in shock and they are frightened because there have been more than 50 aftershocks since that big quake struck. Now, President Xi has ordered all-out efforts. He has instructed rescue teams to do its best to help look after all the casualties, to make sure those who've lost their homes have shelter and help those in the aftermath of this tragedy. But it will be a huge challenge. Roads have been split open by the quake, so access to these remote areas is very, very difficult. And as I mentioned, those temperatures overnight are going to be freezing. So the race is now on to search for survivors.
All right, Laura Bicker for us. Thank you very much. Southern California is bracing for a dangerous windstorm. The high winds pose a risk for wildfires and power outages across at least 5 major cities. CBS News Los Angeles reporter Lori Perez has more on how homeowners are preparing.
We kind of put our backyard furniture away, tucked it all in.
Miriam Siddiqui's backyard setup has been put away tonight as she prepares for whatever blows their way over the next few days. And she knows how bad it can get. This is video of the whipping winds at her Simi Valley home during a 2022 red flag warning. Tonight, homeowners hearing predictions of winds over 60 miles per hour are worried about the damage that could cause, but also and especially knowing with wind comes
the fires. We're always worried about the fires.
They're not the only ones. CAL FIRE's chief announced tonight they are immediately sending 45 more engines and 6 more hand crews from northern to southern California. The governor's office says a mutual aid plan includes 65 pre-positioned local engines, 7 water tenders, 7 helicopters, 9 dozers, and more than 105 specialized personnel. Ventura County fire officials say they have more firefighters on duty and 2 additional strike teams ready to go, taking lessons learned from recent fires into this week's plan. The National Weather Service says the high wind, high fire risk extends across and beyond the foothills of Simi, San Gabriel, and San Fernando valleys. Wind damage, flames, and power outages are all possible, prompting homeowners to try to protect what they can. Many of Jason McMullen's neighbors lost their homes in the mountain fire as howling winds carried embers for miles.
You can see flames all throughout this neighborhood. So I stayed and with some of the neighbors, and we rode it out here.
The Siddiqui family will not be riding it out. She says at the first hint of serious risk,
we're ready to go. Yeah, we have everything set tonight, and we're going to just monitor the news and look out the window and see how bad it is.
All right, for more on the weather, let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with another look at the national forecast. Hey, Grant.
Hey, Vlad. So look, across Southern California, we've got this red flag warning. We talk a lot about this as a danger for fires, but this particular red flag warning in effect today is what the National Weather Service calls a particularly dangerous situation. And with that, that's the most extreme concern for this red flag warning due to these elevated fire conditions because of these high winds that are expected. 50, 60, 70, maybe upwards of nearly 100-mile-per-hour wind gusts are going to be flying over the mountains and then descending into the valley, and that's going to be fueling that potential for fires to spread. You've got dry conditions on the ground. The relative humidity is dry, so it's just prime conditions for fires to start and spread quickly. You've got a critical fire danger across the valley today, but into tomorrow, those conditions just get a little bit more concerning. So an extreme fire danger in effect for portions up towards Santa Clarita, just north of L.A. So that'll be a really close place to keep an eye on as we go through the next 24 to 48 hours. Meanwhile, we've got snow moving across the Rockies into the high plains, but most of the United States, you're talking about the northern tier and the eastern half of the United States, Arctic air literally blowing in, making it very, very cold. Wind chill values 10 to 15 degrees below zero across the northern tier states, places even Atlanta waking up with temperatures in the 20s, feeling really cold out there. That Arctic air is going to set the stage for our next storm system that will start to take shape as we make our way through the second half of the week. This low pressure system starts to move out of the Gulf of Mexico. It'll send that moisture up into that cold air, and you've got a potential snowstorm in the south. Places like Atlanta could see snow going into Friday. Vlad?
All right, Grant Gilmore, thank you very much, my brother. Appreciate it. The Consumer Electronics Show kicks off today. We've got some previews of some of the biggest tech trends taking over Las Vegas. That's coming up. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. The Consumer Electronics Show is now underway in Las Vegas. This year, the highly anticipated tech event is making it clear that AI is here to stay. It's in everything from robots that will pick up your laundry to mirrors offering skincare advice. Bridget Carey is the editor-at-large of CNET, and she joins us live from the floor of this year's CES to talk more about some of these gadgets. All right, so we already said it, Bridget. AI is one of the biggest trends this year. What else is on your radar?
Hey, Vlad. Yeah, AI is in everything, right? But it's more like, what can the AI actually do for us that's useful? And I see a lot of gadgets also trying to solve individual problems. So in the case of AI, yeah, you see it everywhere. But one thing that really kind of took me back was, seeing a printer that used AI so that you wouldn't print all the banner ads and all the junk that you don't want on the website thing. But this is a show for really big splashy TVs as well, right? So when it comes to TVs, you see TV concepts that might be implemented years down the road. It's not just bigger and brighter, which is the more, common stuff you see at the store, but I've even seen TVs that bend in strange ways or kind of bulge out. Like Samsung has a concept where like it goes from 2D to 3D and actually comes out, looks like a horror movie effect. I don't I don't know where we're going to see some of these things, but here you see another one that is bending. Some screens are going from e-ink to normal. Some are just more sturdy now. So there's a lot of different concepts of how we can take screen technology in new ways, and it's a lot of also health, like just solving our everyday problems with gadgets in different ways.
Yeah, I mean, I see that AI is in everything. I mean, the new Apple operating system has intelligence. Now, when you do a search in Google, it leads you to a bunch of AI responses that I always find need to be fact-checked. But the other way that you see AI appear is in, for example, house cleaning robots. And tell me about this bathroom mirror that can tell me if I have zits or not.
Man, I know. It's like when I wake up, do I really need a mirror to say like how bad I'm really doing under the eyes? But that is what they're kind of using some of the smarts for. You have these cameras that for a while have been able to identify certain things. So would you want it in a mirror for, being able to see, do I have problems? I think some companies are taking it further because you might not always want a camera in your mirror. I saw L'Oreal do something that was different that you might see in a department store, where you'll be able to just take a little sticker on your cheek and it takes some of the dead skin cells off your cheek, processes it with the proteins, and see what problems you might have down the road that you can't even see in the mirror yet. Turns out wrinkles might be a problem and retinal's good for me. So there's a lot of different things you can kind of get tested in new ways. I like the fact that like sometimes these robots that clean your floors, they've had AI for a while now where they can identify objects to avoid bumping into them. But now they're taking their smarts and saying, okay, we know that's a sock. Can we get an arm to pick up that sock off the floor? Okay, now they're growing limbs, Vlad. Now the robot vacuums are growing limbs. And sometimes they're taking their smarts to say, oh, that's a stair. There's another company called Dreamy that has a little bit of a leg situation where it can bump itself up over a step.
That's really funny. Well, as you know, Bridget, I mean, at the end of the day, we are the product, right? So those mirrors, I guarantee you, it's not so much about us purchasing the mirrors to have them. It's about the mirrors identifying problems with your skin and then getting spam from all the skincare companies who know that you're using this mirror. Bridget Carey, always great to see you, my friend.
I had one tell me. I was gonna say, I had one tell me some depressing stuff about dangerous eye bags. I'm like, please, no, don't tell me that here.
I love it. All right, thank you, my friend. Talk to you soon.
Thanks.
All right, coming up, we're waiting on a news conference from President-elect Donald Trump. These are live pictures of the podium where he's expected to give his remarks in the next hour. And these are live pictures from the Carter Center in Atlanta, Georgia. Within the next hour, the former president's remains will leave the center en route to Washington, where his body will lie in state for the next 2 days. We'll follow the ceremonies honoring his life and legacy throughout the course of the day. As for us, we'll be right back. Heavy rain has caused severe flooding in the UK. More than 200 flood warnings are in effect in England. Crews work to free stranded people from their homes and cars. It's not clear when travel across the country will return to normal. But one man decided to use the flooding as an opportunity to have some fun. This is video from Leicestershire, just outside Birmingham. A helicopter caught a vehicle dragging a person on a wakeboard behind it, catching some waves. Gotta love it. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with the last look at the national forecast. Hi, Grant.
Hey, Vlad, yeah, look, much of the eastern half of the United States are working with anything that has fallen is now ice on the ground, very cold and blustery conditions across a good portion of the country. You got snow moving across the Rockies. You've got the concern for fires with those Santa Ana winds across Southern California. Relatively calm weather for now, but as we go through the second half of the week, we're going to be watching a storm system that'll be pulling out of the western Gulf of Mexico, and that could bring another round of winter weather to the southern states as we go into the weekend. Vlad, back to you for now, though.
All right, Grant. See you tomorrow. Thank you. That does it for me, but stay right where you are. After the break, Elizabeth Cook is live from San Francisco. She'll follow along as former President Jimmy Carter's remains leave Atlanta and head to Washington, D.C. You're looking at some live pictures right now coming into us from Atlanta, Georgia. His body will lie in state for the next 2 days in the Capitol. This is CBS News 24/7.